How's it going?
Nice. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing?
Pretty solid, pretty solid. Nice evening out here in Texas.
Yeah. I was gonna ask actually if you were still located there. Are you in the Austin area?
Yes, yeah, I'm in Austin. Been here about 4 years. And you were in Boston, but now are you in South Carolina
Yeah,
or
so I was
Atlanta?
in Boston since 2016, and then during the pandemic, my wife and we were living in Charlotte for a year, and
Okay.
then we just moved back, I think about almost 2 years ago now, but we bought a house here. So we're
And
settled
sorry,
in.
where is that now?
It's a town called Hudson. It's maybe an hour outside of Boston. But yeah, New
Okay,
New
not so
England.
back from her. Back in the Northeast.
Yeah, back to the cold weather. Which
And you had a kid too. Congratulations. Did you successfully get them to bed?
yeah, thank you. No, he's not. He's taking his bath right
Nice.
now while we're doing this. But yeah, he's and then he's a year old now, so yeah, it's been flying by. It's pretty wild.
How's dad life been? I don't have any kids yet, but I'm sure it'll happen soon enough. And I'm always asking all my friends that are recent parents.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's great. Yeah, I mean it changes a lot for sure. I think it definitely makes me a lot more aware of time. Now it's everything's on a schedule. It like helps to know what's happening in a day. I don't know.
Yeah,
It definitely forces you to like be on your time management. I think that's the biggest thing.
I was gonna say I feel like that's been the number one thing that I knew would be coming with that is that it's like all right, I can't just be willy nilly with my schedule and pull all nighter here and there if I mess up, but have to actually be paying attention to like getting things done in a timely manner so that you can have time for everything else you need to do.
Yeah, definitely. Although you kind of end up pulling all nighters anyways. You're just up all the time. So,
Yeah. I think
yeah,
it's a design school tendency. You can never shake it off.
yeah, for sure. But you've been freelancing for a while now. So do you kind of maintain regular hours with that, or do you find yourself working a lot late at night?
I mean, I I do find myself working late at night a lot, mostly, yeah, with freelance work. But that's pretty much all because of just procrastination, like just, not being productive during the day or just kind of being down to do whatever. My wife works a pretty normal schedule, but yeah, sometimes being focused in the day can be tricky. Um, so yeah, it's always like around a deadline. I'll end up just like pulling an all nighter and punching myself for not using all the free time I had in the previous weeks, but not too often, but it still happens.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like especially in the winter when there's less daylight, like it helps to just knock out for like 30 minutes and try to squeeze in a walk or, find some way to like enjoy the weather while you can.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we have a dog now, which definitely helps for getting outside because I feel like if we didn't have her, it'd be hard to yeah leave the office and get some fresh air and so that's been really good too.
Yeah, nice. Well, awesome, man. I'm super excited to talk to you. We caught up a couple years ago, but I was asking you kind of some specific questions around California where you were living at the time, but I'm curious to like kind of figure out what has happened and like how your career has evolved since school because the last time I saw you we were both in design school. We are in Boone,
Yeah,
North Carolina, and then kind of cut to now you've had sort of this whole widespread, I don't know if widespread's the right word, but like very deep career in like visualization, and you've built up this massive following with like your Blender tutorials. So I'm just really curious to hear like what's been going on the last 10 years.
yeah. Well, so so yeah. I mean, you kind of kicked it off. Like, we obviously both went to school for industrial design at Appalachian State. So you kind of know the story at that point, since you went through basically the same program. But kind of before that, I just to give a slight context on the the direction that it all ended up. But yeah, I took CAD classes in high school, and that's where I was first introduced to 3D was with SolidWorks in like our CAD 3 class. Um, and I just thought 3D was like the most insane thing ever. I mean, I had seen it in like the Jurassic Park behind the scenes or something. So I knew 3D like existed, but like actually like touching it was incredible. So then, as
Yeah.
we know, we got to use it a little bit in school, which was fun, and that's kind of around when I started dabbling in Blender. Um, but to make a long story short, yeah, last 10 years, went from kind of, using it a little bit in school to playing with it a lot more on my own, becoming more interested in animation, starting to post and share some work, and then trying to have some of that 3D spill more over into my career. So I had a I don't know if you know, but I was working at Bernhardt Design in Lenore when I was still working, still living in Boone, but I had kind of like a more engineering role there. But after my now wife moved to California, I took on a part-time job doing 3D visualization for a smaller furniture company called Furniture Lab. That was in Carborough, North Carolina. Um, so that was like kind of moving the job into a more 3D realm, while also doing more personal work, kind of stepping further and further away from industrial design, honestly. Um, but then kind of reinvigorated my love for industrial design with some personal projects and kind of just getting involved in a lot of the same communities you're a part of on Instagram and Discord and stuff. Um, and then, yeah, eventually, I would say mostly through social media, I started to pick up some freelance work, and that's kind of what I've been doing for the past 5 years. And YouTube channel started sort of around the same time, but I know I started granular and then just took off. But I'm happy to elaborate or talk more about
Yeah.
any particular point in there
Yeah,
or
yeah, I'm curious. One thing I was curious to ask because I'm trying to think back like 10 years ago. Did you have a background in graphic design as well?
I didn't. I mean, I've like many industrial design students, it's kind of like you love art in middle school and high school and stuff, but you're also kind of into the math side of things. And I feel like industrial design is very similar to graphic design in that way, where it's very like analytical, but there's still a massive opportunity for creativity. So I did not have a graphic design background, but um, I mean, I think at the same time I became interested in industrial design, I was also very interested in logo design and brands, and that's kind of when I started discovering all these little design art blogs and Behance and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think the interest in graphic design in particular would have come from, yeah, just like the internet. Like I feel like the
Yeah.
design internet was exploding in like 2005.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, the reason I asked is I feel like if I remember you had like kind of a very distinct like I don't know what the right word is, like lenience into like heavy graphics and like really strong layouts, like a lot of bright colors when I would see your work kind of like posted up for senior shows or different things. So it seemed like that seed of like like visual style and like 3D was kind of there early on. I mean, especially now, like seeing where you've like landed and looking back, it's like, oh, okay, this makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
it's really interesting to hear you say that because yeah, you would have seen some of that work in school because people nowadays will say, "Oh, you have like this simple style," and I always kind of assumed I developed that in 3D, but now that you mentioned like having seen it in earlier work, I wonder when that did start. I mean, I definitely think with a lot of like the super contrasted or more graphic type forms. I feel like I did pick up a lot of that, like even early with industrial design, just the design principles. I feel like is something that I will kind of always go back to. So I wonder if some of that early industrial design education was a seed for some of that.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And then you got your start with Bernhard. It's funny. I started at Liat, which was
That's right. I feel
which
like we all worked for one of those furniture
yeah,
companies. I
which
don't
for a
know.
lot of people who don't know, I feel like North Carolina, I don't know if this is still the case, but it's kind of like this massive furniture hub for like the
Definitely, it's
US.
definitely still the case. I feel like.
Yeah. Are there other areas of the country that have it at that level of density, or is it the South, or is it only North Carolina specifically?
Um, I would say it is the South more than other parts of the country, but North Carolina specifically, I think, has a huge, I think it always, or at least, since the 1800s has been a hub for furniture. I don't know what other areas. I think like the Northwest, like Oregon and Washington. I think it's related to the availability of wood in those areas, but I don't
Mm,
I don't know exactly. But yeah, North Carolina has definitely been a furniture hub for a long time.
yeah, that's funny. And then, yeah, it's funny too because I was hired there and I was doing visualization as well. I mean, I was only using Keyshot, not Blender. I think we were on, I'm trying to remember. I think it was like Keyshot 5 or
Yeah.
6. So like very, very different version. But it's funny. I remember like going very deep on 3D during that time just because it was part of my job and I was trying to maintain employment. But I remember there was not a lot of resources at that time. Like there were some rules of thumb, like you could kind of find a little bit information around like chromatic aberration and grain and like
Mhm.
a couple of those small tricks that you could use for photorealism. But I feel like the knowledge was definitely not out there that in the way that it is now. Um, was Blender similar, or has it always kind of had like that community
Um,
tutorial to it?
yeah, I mean, it has grown, it has exploded. It's definitely, the biggest now that it ever has been. And I'm sure tomorrow will be even bigger, but I would say like online, like education availability of resources in general is um, that's like a way bigger thing now. So I would say for any software or anything you're trying to learn, online education has gotten way bigger. But with Blender in particular, I would say that the because it's open source, because it's free, because there's a wide user base, um, Blender does kind of naturally, I feel like, come with that spirit of sharing. So I do think that Blender had a significant leg up. Yeah, much earlier on, like in the. I mean, Blender's been around for a very long time, but yeah, like when we would have been kind of learning them, like in college or something like that. The Blender community was definitely already pretty big at that time, and I learned Blender pretty much entirely through YouTube tutorials.
Oh wow.
There's some like professional resources, but with Blender being open source and with a lot of like young people using it because it's free, there were a lot of free resources for learning how to do it. Because in case of Keyshot, it's an expensive software, so it kind of comes with a more professional training, professional mind. There's not a lot of people just playing around with it and sharing what they
Right.
figure out. So I would say Blender in particular has always had a pretty accessible community, and not just YouTube tutorials. That's bigger now, but I did a ton of just writing and reading on Blender forums in those days. That was a pretty popular way to talk about stuff, get problem solved, learn.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm probably going to be asking way too many questions about Blender. Just because
I
I
love.
don't know that much about it, but I do see like that explosion happening that you
Mhm.
mentioned. I feel like there's a huge migration of 3D artists. I feel like there was a wave maybe like 5, 6 years ago from packages like maybe like 3D Max and V-Ray
Yeah.
and Maya and some of those old Autodesk packages. And I feel like now there's like another wave of people going from like some of the more modern packages like Cinema 4D and Redshift, and even those folks are starting to now like migrate over to Blender, which has definitely like caught my attention.
Hmm.
Um, but so I guess for yourself, like, are you still kind of dedicated pretty much to Blender as a singular package, or have you branched out at all with like Unreal or Houdini or like any of the other softwares?
It always feels weird to say, but yes, I'm still like just like Blender is it's open in the background right now. Like it's the
Yeah,
only it's really the only software I'm ever using, and it's typically not a good idea to throw all your professional eggs in one basket. But I do feel confident, obviously, with Blender being open source, the longevity of it, And I definitely feel like the skills, once you reach a certain level, um, artistic level, or style level, interest level, the software becomes less important. So if I ever had to switch to Cinema 4D or something like that, I could. That being said, I obviously originally used CAD software, so SolidWorks is kind of where it all started. Used Rhino a little bit in college, hated it. Used Pro Engineer in my first job. 3ds Max was one of the other first softwares that I did download before Blender. I played with Maya, because they had a personal learning edition. This was in 2008. Um, and like the 3ds Max version was like a cracked version. I played with a couple other rendering engines early on with Blender, but I just, my workflow has developed to a point where if I can't do it in Blender, I just don't really do it. That being said, I mean, I do use like Photoshop and Illustrator when I need to, and After Effects is usually how I like edit the videos together. But I mean, the editing I'm talking about is like doing like brightness and contrast, like very basic things that you actually could do those in Blender. But I just, for some reason, I'm still playing for Adobe Creative Cloud. But no, I mean, Houdini, I would say, is one that you mentioned. That would be the most interesting other one to learn, because I still think, um, I'm starting to not feel this way, but Houdini still has a pretty huge leg up on proceduralism and simulation, which is all really cool. Blender can do a lot of that, has been able to do a lot of that, but nowhere near to the level that Houdini can. Um, so Houdini is something that was interesting for a while, but now with Blender having geometry nodes, I think that most things that are currently capable, that you're currently able to do only in Houdini, you can do now or will be able to do soon in Blender. And I have not touched Blender's geometry nodes, so I don't think learning the same mathematic principles in another software would make any sense. So um, if it wasn't, if you couldn't have guessed it already, I'll probably stay in Blender. There probably will not be Houdini anytime in my near future.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it definitely seems like the right choice from a longevity standpoint. Because if you look at something like you mentioned SolidWorks and Rhino, like those packages have not evolved at all, really. I would say in the last 10 years. I mean, there might be like minor feature updates or like quality of life improvements, but for the most part, like the workflow, the tool set, the way of modeling is still the same as it was in 2005. Whereas I feel like Blender seems to do a good job of kind of capitalizing on new technologies and incorporating them in a way that is capturing the best of what they are. Like you mentioned the geometry nodes, and I don't know, I really don't know much about them, but my understanding is that it's kind of like a Houdini light, where it kind of does the bulk of the basics of what you would need Houdini for, but might not go to like that far level of doing super esoteric tasks that you would need to do in Houdini. So it seems like, and I think that's one of the things that's starting to really catch my eye is the continuous updating and the continuous feature improvement. On the other hand, it definitely makes it more complicated. It seems like the bar to entry keeps getting higher, but I don't know if that's the case or not.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. And I have the same, I guess you could call it imposter syndrome about Blender. Like, I like every time there's new updates and stuff coming out and new features, and there's new hair features, and there's new this, and there's new grease pencil and 2D styles, and I feel so overwhelmed. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I haven't even touched any of that. Like, there's massive areas of Blender that people love and that Blender's great at that I have never touched still. I'm using basically all the same tools I used the first, year I was using Blender. Um,
Oh wow.
there are definitely like a lot of new features and stuff, and to the point of software like SolidWorks not being updated often. I mean, I do feel like a lot of the updates around like Blender are based on rendering for one, like performance updates, um, and like stylized things and different things being calculated differently, or lighting adjustments. And with SolidWorks or Rhino not really dealing as much with rendering, I mean, the way you model in Blender now, I would say, is the same as the way you modeled in Blender 20 years ago. So I guess it's not as surprising that a software like SolidWorks or Rhino would still feel the same, but it is exciting that obviously once you do get into rendering and lighting and animation, um, and you're kind of in the software a lot more, doing new unique things and having to operate new and more unique tools, then yeah, it is powerful to have sort of a constantly evolving interface, workflow options. I mean, you can do everything in Blender so many different ways. Um, so it is nice to, yeah, sort of have a constant development.
Yeah. At the same time, I think that was what sort of like bounced me off of it, coming from like an ID background, was just the depth of the tools. Like the first thing I did, which I think is kind of like a meme in the community, it's the tutorial series that everyone does, which is, you can probably guess it before I'm even going to say
The
it.
donut, yeah.
It's the donut.
Hmm.
Um and it was like this, it's like this 8-part series. It covers, it's for anyone who doesn't know, it's just how to basically model and render a donut, like a glazed donut with sprinkles on it on a table. um but what I found was that like throughout that series, it's almost like every 30 seconds there's like some completely different way of working, or new tool or new window or menu or something, that like you're just taking in so much information so quickly that for me it really illustrated like, okay, if I want to make this transition, I'm going to need to dedicate like a long, it's going to have to be like a long-term commitment to
Hmm.
going into this tool set and really like breaking it down. Like, what is your advice for people who like maybe you're familiar with like other packages but are interested in Blender? Like, what is the best way to kind of dip your toe into it?
Yeah, I definitely understand like that hurdle. And like when I started using Blender, I quit and started and quit and started, and like you press a button and everything disappears, and it's just like, what was that? And you just get really mad and you quit. I had a lot of that. I would say it's probably about a year of on and off kind of sporadic evenings, playing with it before I got to a level of actually feeling like somewhat comfortable with it. So I get that, but as far as if you wanted to kind of dip your toes into it, I mean, definitely having familiarity with just how 3D software works is really helpful. Like if you've done CAD modeling, or maybe you have played around in Unreal or Unity or something like that. So just kind of having a general idea of kind of what parts are in a 3D world is helpful. Um, but yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's obviously not going to be easy. It is going to just come with frustration, but just knowing that there's so many resources out there, and I think it's really easy to like spend even just 10 seconds fiddling around trying to solve a problem. And a lot of times when you're brand new to software, that's just not the way to go about it. Just Google literally everything. Because especially in a software like Blender with so many users, like you can Google very, very specific questions, and almost always there's a forum post, or nowadays an entire video dedicated to like exactly the thing you were having trouble with. That can be very cumbersome, but for a more straightforward way through would be, yeah, following tutorials. The donut one obviously is a great tutorial series, because it does a good job of kind of keeping you engaged, but also showing the sort of more critical parts of Blender. If you depending on what type of person, I think a lot of people are turned off to the donut tutorial because they're coming from like a design background. They're like, I'm never
Right.
going to make a scene with a cartoon donut and a
Right,
cup of
right.
coffee.
I feel like it
Um,
does a good job though of giving you like an understanding of what the tools, like what the program can do. You
yeah.
see like the breadth of the tool set, and for me that was the biggest thing coming out of it, was like, okay, I know I can do, I know what UV unwrapping is. I know I can set up a scene, I can set up materials, and then it's kind of like on you to progress those afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, it can be, there's definitely like a tutorial prison you can get in where you're just following videos and following videos, and you kind of struggling to come up with projects of your own or take what you learn from the tutorials and apply it. But yeah, having a small project in mind that you want to try to do, that you think you can do, um, and doing it on your own as best you can. But then yeah, just when you run into a problem, like how do I do this, and maybe then it takes you to a tutorial, but then instead of following the tutorial, you're just looking for a specific process within that tutorial that you can then apply to your own project. Um, but yeah, just chipping away at it one tool at a time. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't it doesn't keep getting harder. It starts getting easier, and also not being afraid of repetition. I mean, all the time I will just clear a file out and just start fresh, just to just do the same thing faster, faster, more. That helps a lot, but it sucks
Yeah.
at first, but it's so worth it once you get past that.
Yeah. And I feel like as soon as you build something a second time, it goes, I would say, like 3 times the speed as it does the first time. So it's really not even, it's not like you're, oh, I spent an hour figuring this out and now I'm going to spend another hour, redoing it. Sometimes it's only like an extra 15 minutes. You can like
Yeah.
blaze
No,
through all those steps.
yeah, I always say, I mean, the creativity is the part that takes the longest time. Like actually executing it, once you're proficient, doesn't take that long, and through repetition, you'll become more proficient. But yeah, I mean, if I take any freelance project I've done in the past 3 years that I might have spent 2 months on it, if I had to recreate that, like the actual technical, just rebuilding it in Blender, it would take 2 days. That 3 months is deciding all the creative things, like what should happen here, what materials should we use here, what should this look like. That's what takes time. Actually creating it, once you are proficient, is usually not an insane amount of time.
Yeah. And I feel like it's good advice too that you're giving around like not getting stuck in tutorial hell, for
Yeah,
lack of a better term. Like, especially now, it just seems like there's so like technology. I mean, we'll get into AI. I'd love to get into AI with you in a bit, but outside of that, even just technology across the board, it's progressing so fast and things are evolving so quickly. Like keeping up is almost it could be like a full-time job. I mean, I think that's
yeah.
why like on my side, being in like an in-house designer, you start to see like a lot of these corporations starting to hire out for like just educators, people who can just keep their teams up to speed and like distill information down because there's just so much.
Hmm.
It can be like pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's always new stuff, and it's maybe that's why I've been using Blender for so long. Is that I'm just afraid of new things, and I've got my one thing, and it changes a little bit kind of with me, but don't have to think too much outside this one little box I've put myself
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. Do you one of the things I hear about Blender a lot is the add-ons. Do you use a lot of plugins and a lot of add-ons, or do you kind of stick with the tool or the core tool set?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty much a vanilla Blender guy.
It's the southern
For the
accent. You've been
same
in Texas for too long.
Yeah, yeah. For the same reason that I'm not using other softwares, I'm usually not using add-ons. It's just there's so many. Like if you go to the Blender market, there's like 1,000 million add-ons, and a lot of them are free. So it's like, well, if this is going to speed up my workflow, then I should do it. But most add-ons don't do anything that you can't already do in Blender. They just do it like a little bit faster. So there's probably a lot of add-ons I should be using, but again, I love that repetition. I love starting a scene from scratch, no shortcuts. Not because I want to save the time, but again, because it's the creativity that takes the time. So like, there's a lot of add-ons for like automatic camera motions. You two click and you'll have an amazing, spin around animation for your product. And
Right.
yeah, if you're just trying to work really fast, you just need something, then those add-ons can be helpful. But I don't know where I want the camera to go. I don't know exactly what I want it to look like. So I add it in myself and then look through it and like, oh, let's move it over here. That's just one example, but no. The exception would be like there's some small ones. Well, there's one I use called Flip Fluids that does good fluid simulation. So that brings a higher quality fluid simulator into Blender. Um, that's one of the few that I use often. There's also just some that are like built into Blender that you just have to enable. I might have several of those enabled, but they're like just very small quality of life things. But no, no major add-ons. The other exception would be I did recently download like some big asset packs that allow you to like scatter grass and rocks and stuff on surfaces with assets that a lot of the reason that I'll buy those is because they come with like a lot of plants and rock assets that sometimes I like to use. But no, in general, I don't really use a ton of add-ons. Pretty much regular old Blender. And another reason for that is because I do make tutorials now. I never want to have like someone who is new to Blender. I don't want to have to start the video with like, you need these 7 add-ons that cost
Right.
$197 before you can get
Right.
started. So I try to keep it all like very basic, very default for that reason too.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you've been working now, kind of doing like design for I don't know what the right term is for. Is it design visualization, or do you call it motion graphics, or
I don't know. I usually refer to myself as a digital designer.
digital designer?
But yeah, I mean, I would say the work I do, most other people would probably call that product visualization, product animation, 3D animation. Uh,
Yeah.
there's not a good place to land there.
Yeah, that's a good term for it. Do you find that that is still a field that is in demand? Like, are there still a lot of is there a big need for that among like I don't know who I would say like the main client base is, but I guess just manufacturers or consumer products companies.
You're talking about for like 3D animation?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I would say more on like the yeah, product visualization side specifically.
Yeah, I would say it's growing. I mean, COVID was a good example of, you can't do photography, so a lot of companies looked into digital at that time. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's certain cases where it just makes more sense to do things in 3D that would have previously been done with um, photography. One good example is, if a company releases a new color of something, rather than having to do a whole new photo shoot, you can just open the 3D model and change it. So I think that, I mean, just there's new products coming out all the time, so it's um, like there's definitely always going to be a need for it, I would say. But also just with everything we do becoming more digital and like the metaverse and stuff, like just in general, like everything is sort of is more digital, and 3D is just like it's like the way things are just presented. I feel like more and more. So the animation, yes, in particular, I guess, but also just 3D as a whole. But yeah, I mean, there's always going to be there's always going to be people that need like images of things
Right.
that don't exist yet, or have ideas. I mean, at its base, 3D is just a communication tool like writing or drawing. So you can there's just so many applications for it that yeah, it's hard to say if it's growing or is just is a thing or what. But yeah, I think there's work out there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah, I asked just because I feel like when I graduated school like 2014, um I feel like design visualization or like kind of what you would refer to as like digital design. I feel like it wasn't really a field that at least to my knowledge. And I feel like slowly over the course of 10 years, it's kind of like continuously built and built and built up. But I
Hmm.
still remember like articles around, hey, IKEA's new catalog is all 3D models, and that was like a big shift at the time. It was like a very viral, headline that they were doing that. And now I feel like it's almost the expectation. Like why would you not do that? You can save just because you can save so much time and money.
Hmm. Yeah, it's I would say I didn't know it was a job either until I mean, kind of until I started getting hired for it. Like I just kind of found my way into it. I would say my first point where maybe I realized like that it can be a job on its own, because I always paired it with like industrial design, like, oh, I can use this to
Right.
design my products or show off my products, but I never really made the business case for it. And that was a big thing that happened when I kind of went freelance, was not just, oh, I'm good enough at Blender, but like I was like, okay, there is real value to a business in what I can provide here. I would say I actually first realized that at that second job after Bernhardt, where that was a very small furniture company, and I was doing, we did a lot of like custom booths and tables for cafeterias and break rooms and like school cafeterias, libraries, public spaces. And I was doing anywhere from, 2 to like 15 renders a day of these custom booths or custom setups where, traditionally you would take if you were buying a custom chair from someone, they'd be like, okay, it's going to be this chair, and then it's going to have this finish on it, and we're going to use this fabric, and you'd have sort of these separate samples or photos of them, kind of all disconnected. But I would take all those finish options and sometimes even take their floor plans and put all the furniture in space with their custom options and do I'll call it realistic now. They weren't fantastic, but they were pretty good. This would have been in like 2015, 16. Um, but those renders were helping us close deals left and right, because they could see it was just an amazing sales tool. So that's where I was like, okay, like I'm legit like helping close deals because of the power of 3D to quickly communicate an idea to a client. Um, oops. And then yeah, around that time is when I would say I was like, okay, like this is a job on its own, is like visualizing products.
Yeah. It's an interesting point. It's a good learning. I maybe this is a controversial question, and I know you're a 3D advocate, so maybe it's a little bit weighted, but I've been getting this increasing feeling like, since you have a background in industrial design, do you feel like at any point 3D renderings or digital design can replace prototyping? Maybe not completely, but partially.
Certain parts of prototyping, maybe. I mean, when it comes to like how something feels in your hand, you can't hold a 3D model unless you 3D
Right.
print it. Um, so, so yeah, I mean, like I do think the prototyping process will probably be more and more and more 3D. Um, but there's always something nice about, creating a cardboard model of something, or blue foam, and kind of shaping things by hand. Um, but but yeah, I mean, fully replace, I wouldn't say so, just because there's always a reason to do one thing one way or another. Um,
Yeah, I feel like ergonomics and scale are kind of the primary drivers for physical prototypes, but it's been interesting. I've been observing this maybe the last, I don't know, 5 years or so. I've seen this division starting with and it could be experience, but like the older generation of designers will tend to want to go to physical prototypes like right after the sketching phase. So if you have like a small thumbnail or a rendering or something of an idea, the thing I'll hear from higher ups is usually like, "Hey, let's prototype that, or let's mock something up fairly quickly." And I think for me and a lot of younger designers, I feel like I see more value in digital design, where it's like, "Hey, this is cheaper, it's faster, and we can basically see what this product is going to look like at a photoreal level if we just build this thing digitally." So I'm wondering like if that will start to tip, or if like as the younger generation gets more experience and gets more deeply embedded, in organizations, if that's something that they'll start bringing to the table, um, especially with Blender in particular. I mean, I know a lot of students are learning it and focusing on it, coming right out of school. So it seems like there's a shift happening there, but I don't know.
yeah, I mean, I definitely think there'll be a shift, partly whether you like it or not, but because the skills will just be lost. Like a lot of the younger generation just probably is getting less and less experience working with their hands, for better or for worse. So that's one reason why it'll start to fade. But yeah, it just depends on what the purpose of the model is. Like I said, if it's how it feels in your hand, or how big it really should be, or how big it feels when it's on a table near you. Like those are all cases for physical prototypes, even if they're very simple. Um, but yeah, if you're playing with you just want to see a couple different color options, um, or just you need to be able to. I mean, honestly, with remote work too, like you need to be able to send it in an email, and it's harder to send a physical prototype quickly or easily. So that's certainly a case where if you're just trying to get a general concept across to someone, yeah, having a rendering of it is good. There is sort of a little bit of a downside with rendering, is that if you take it too far, it might look too realistic, or it might feel too finalized, especially to someone who's not as familiar with the production process or design process. So them seeing a prototype can help them feel like there's opportunity for input still, or there's still room to change things. So
Yeah.
I think there's always cases for one or the other. I would
Right.
never try to push anyone one way or another. I mean, I think that, yeah, depends on the case, depends on the experience of the person, and kind of just depends on what you feel like doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I've definitely run into that a lot with 3D, especially with Keyshot in particular, like just the speed and fidelity that they're kind of hitting now is sometimes we'll show renderings to people and they think, yeah, exactly what you're saying. Oh, this is done. We can just push the button on production and go there immediately. And that's definitely been, I think, the big pushback that I've seen so far with AI stuff as well, is there's kind of been this big hesitation within design to like, oh, okay, well, we don't want to show this to anybody because it's that instantaneous photorealism
Hmm.
um without necessarily having like that I don't know, that kind of critical eye to be able to
Hmm.
understand like an AI image is, which in many cases is really like a sketch. Um, but yeah, I guess I'm curious to ask, like, have you done any diving with AI, or are you kind of do you feel like it's going to have a place in your process on the visualization side?
It's hard to imagine that it wouldn't have a place somehow or another. I'm still not exactly sure, what that would be. I've seen some really cool, more industrial design focused tools like VisCom. You've probably seen. I feel like seen that a lot lately. It's like you input a sketch and it's specifically for like product renderings. Um, you know, I like it. I think the way I've been able to use it best so far is just ideas for um, like I use it more for like environments, or even like lighting ideas, kind of like um, a lot of times in my case the product is already defined, and like what I need to show has been defined, but using the text generators like ChatGPT to just give me like words and keywords, and when I feel this way, like what words might be associated with that. So kind of just to spark my brain a little bit, kind of give me some new ideas. But it's still, it's kind of a lot to fish through. You still have to decide what actually makes sense in a certain case. And then image wise, yeah, like for environments, or it's sort of the same thing. I've never, it's hard to imagine that I'd ever be like one to one creating, okay, I generate an image of a environment and then I'm going to go and model that and use that exact environment. But I like it just as a way to kind of spark an idea. Um, but that might change, and obviously like using AI to actually generate models is something that's interesting. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
I
been
haven't
catching my
I
eye
haven't found it.
recently. Is
What's that?
that's been catching my eye recently? Is that I think I'm starting to see like the text to 3D, where people are writing, okay, I want a Coke can, and it's able to put out like it is like an STL or an OBJ file, but it's super I don't know how to describe it. There's a lot of like noise
Yeah.
in the model.
Yeah, yeah, and those tools, it's hard to imagine where those are going to be used until they develop a lot more. Because, like, yeah, in the case of a Coke can, there's thousands of free models of Coke cans already
Right.
available online, so that are modeled, flawlessly by a human. Nothing against computers, but like, yeah, like I mean, I guess if we're doing like a sci-fi, like using like for background props or something, or um, it's like anything you can think of. There's already a model available for it,
Hmm.
but I can see the AI being useful for like models of things that don't exist yet,
Oh, interesting.
or but like where do you need a model of something that doesn't exist? Like maybe as like a concept art, or I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
I think it's a
that's an
good
interesting
thing that
point.
we don't have to model as much in the future, hopefully. But yeah, like
Yeah.
what models are we going to be needing from AI? I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't even think about that just because I am so focused on like the ID side. I forget that there's these huge, massive, like Turbo Squid and like all
Mhm.
these libraries where you can pretty much get a 3D model of anything you want, whether anything from like the Coke can to like a Model 3, like
Yeah,
completely modeled with like the frame and all of the components.
yeah,
It's pretty wild.
yeah. I don't know where. I mean, I think AI will be helpful. I sure hope, but I still haven't found exactly how I want to use it or will use it. But yeah, I mean, definitely something to keep a close eye on, see where it could land in your
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. Very cool. So yeah, you've had you have the design visualization, you obviously have your YouTube channel, which has gone is massive. I mean, I think I saw there was a video on there that had over 1 million views on it.
Yes,
Um,
that popular one.
excuse me. And then you just did this Skillshare class as well,
Hmm.
right? Was
Correct.
that fairly recent?
Yes, the Skillshare class was, we filmed it about 5 months ago, and it went live
Oh
about
wow.
3 months ago. So yeah, that's pretty recent. And that
How
was,
did
yeah.
that come about? Did they reach out to you or
Yeah, so they reached out to me, I presume, after having seen my YouTube channel, and asked if I would be interested in doing a series of Skillshare Originals classes, which are, so if you're not familiar with the Skillshare platform, anybody can upload courses to Skillshare and sell them, but it's a little bit different than YouTube in that YouTube you can just upload whatever. Skillshare follows a little bit more of like a course format, and you would upload. There's sort of target lengths for videos, and most courses are about an hour, and classes are about 10 minutes each. And in general, the production level that people try to do on Skillshare is sort of a little bit higher. Usually, like show the person. I don't know if that's just like the trend that started there, and it's just kind of now become the Skillshare look. But yeah, they reached out about doing the originals, which is one where they would kind of help me work on the class structure, and then they would actually film it and do all the editing for it. But yeah, that's how it came about. They reached out to me. We had a couple calls, and I presume they probably reached out to a couple other Blender YouTubers. I probably should have taken the first call more seriously, like an actual interview, because I'm very happy that they did decide to work with me. But thinking back on it, I was like, oh shoot, that was like definitely that was an interview
Oh wow.
to
Yeah,
see
yeah.
if I should be the Blender guy, because it was a top searched. I guess yeah, taking another step back. Apparently, Blender had been a very highly searched term on their platform, so they'd been, and
Okay.
there's already some Blender classes on there, but they wanted like an official kind of one to recommend. So I presume they searched around the sprawling Blender community for silly tutorial people, and they found me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's cool. That sounds so they helped you kind of like format the like the structuring of everything. Did
Yeah,
was there stuff there that you were able to like take away and kind of feed like back into your YouTube channel or?
I guess a little bit. Like, yeah, I mean, I was the only Blender expert in the whole process, which was a little weird. I kind of felt like, I was like, don't you guys have like somebody else who like kind of knows what I'm saying? But I mean, they trusted me fully on like everything. So,
Oh wow.
as far as them helping, like, I mean, I came up with all the lessons and what needed to be covered and what we would talk about. Like that was all me, but I had been wanting to do like a course for a long time. I just never got around to like doing it, just procrastination, laziness. So when they reached out, it was really nice because I was like, okay, I can just focus on like what should we teach, and then I just have to show up, and they would actually edit it all down. But sorry, I forgot the other part of your question was about what was the second half of that, or
Like,
maybe
did
I
you
missed.
learn things
Oh
through the
yeah,
process that you brought back in?
yeah, I mean, honestly, it was a lot like making, a YouTube tutorial, so not a ton different there. I mean, I did start to think a little bit more about the sort of the structure of the class because, it's something that they're professionals about at. And I had already kind of started to do like, to make successful YouTube videos, you would kind of already need to be thinking about these things. But yeah, just um, thinking about like what I can, I mean, partly what I can do with editing, like how I can, condense stuff down because we really covered a ton of information and the classes aren't that long. Um, but yeah, so little things here and there. Just it was fun to work kind of with other people on it, whereas the YouTube tutorials are all just by myself. But for the most part, I would say it's actually it was kind of like making a YouTube video in terms of the process, just with 20 people instead of one.
Oh wow. Yeah, it's a big crew. I'd
Oh,
imagine
it
it's
wasn't.
nice.
I don't actually know what the whole crew was. I mean, the actual crew on set was, I think, like 5 or 6 people, like a local media company in Austin that were doing like the lighting and the operating the cameras and stuff. Then there was a producer that was actually zooming in from New York, I think is where she lived, and she worked for Skillshare. And then they have people at Skillshare that actually edit the class, but I don't know how many people that is.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah, I showed up at the Airbnb and we shot the videos. I brought a bunch of different changes of shirts. It took we did 5 videos in 4 days, so it was intense
Oh
for
wow. Yeah,
someone
that's compressed.
for someone like me that isn't used to a normal 9 to 5 schedule. It was a lot.
Yeah. I have to
It was
imagine
fun.
it's nice though, like knowing that there's going to be like an audience for it. Whereas I feel like if you were to go develop a course on your own, it's like a big time investment, and then you're kind of
Mhm.
like hoping that it sells. Because I've definitely heard a lot of scenarios where it's like just because you have a lot of I don't know what the right like what it's like views versus engagement. Like just because a lot of people are viewing the content doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get that like sell through to
Yeah,
the course. So like being able to justify whatever development time that would be of like doing it on your own might be like trickier to calculate.
yeah. It can definitely be. I mean, yeah, I would say that's another reason is I didn't want to have to deal with like the sales and like promoting it and stuff. So having them kind of manage all that. I mean, financially for them, obviously it's a win. Like it's probably worth it for them to,
Right.
pay me, but then have it on their platform because, at the end of the day, I would guess that obviously they're making money off it too. So the advantage with doing a course yourself is that you get to keep all that money, but it comes with an, sort of unknown amount of extra work. If I really wanted to make the most money from creating a course, then probably doing it by yourself would be the way to go. But if you're someone like me who wants to have a course but doesn't want to put in all that work, and doesn't care about not maximizing profits on it, and also just appearing as an expert, they're a respectable platform. They're going to promote it. They're going to push it out. They're paying for all the professional video production that's going to make me look good. So you think about it just like any other business deal. It's a fair trade. So was more than happy to work with them and do the classes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, very cool, man. Yeah, it's been great. I feel like I've definitely taken a lot away. What is so what's next? Or is there anything like on the horizon or anything coming up?
I never know. I don't. I always wonder if am I just going to be doing this for the rest of my life or what.
The and
Um,
plus like the wild and woolly world of freelance.
yeah, yeah. In the most near future, nothing major new. I've got some. It's the end of the month, so I got to get my videos together for Squarespace. I have my contract to do 2 videos with them per month, and I always wait till
Oh.
the last of the month to get them done. So working on some tutorials now, and then there's always little freelance jobs hopping around here and there, but bigger picture, longer term, I've taken more interest in just general marketing and business development and how 3D can be used to help launch businesses and help businesses get investment. So I'm working with a couple companies now where I sort of have an equity deal where basically just doing a lot of free work, but learning a lot more about being like a contributing member of a business and kind of having a little more stake in the success of a business. So that's kind of my, I guess, more near term goals is to sort of be a part of a business early on and help that grow because as cool as freelance work is, eventually my hands are going to become crippled and my eyes will become swollen, and I don't think I could support myself forever just slinging 3D animation. So always trying to kind of grow my skill set bigger than the technical skills.
Yeah, man. That's awesome. Well, cool, man. I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm it's great. Yeah, it was cool to see like your leap because I wasn't necessarily along for the ride, but like you mentioned, we started like kind of reconnecting in some of these different like communities on Discord, and I was like blown away to see the start and the finish. So it's cool to hear more about like the journey and kind of like the how you got there. Um
Yeah, yeah, no, it's always fun to kind of think back on it too and see where things landed and use that path to help figure out what the next path would be.
yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, I'm gonna close this down, but I guess maybe just to wrap up, if people want to get in touch or if people want to kind of take a look at your work or follow you, what are all the sort of the platforms, the different plugs for Derek Elliott?
Yeah, I mean, my website, dirk.com, DERRK.com, has links to everything, but hopefully get that updated pretty soon because I haven't updated it in a very long time, but that's something I'm kind of working on now. But besides that, Derek Elliott on YouTube if you want to watch Blender tutorials. And then Instagram is probably the place where I'm really most active in terms of talking to people, looking at people's work, sharing my work. Instagram's still kind of been my hub there. But yeah, I'm on the internet.
Awesome. No TikTok though.
No, I did have a TikTok, and I was just reposting old videos from Instagram, and it was kind of dumb. And then I posted one of them, and it got like 4 million views,
Oh
and I
my
was like,
God.
oh dang, like TikTok is freaking sweet. And so I kept posting more videos, and they didn't get 4 million views, and it became too addicting. So I got off it. I've been off and on it a couple times in the past however long TikTok's been a thing, but currently not a TikToker.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Instagram, YouTube, and then your website. Yeah, thanks again, Derek. I really appreciate you carving out some time. And I know it's late, but yeah, thanks again for speaking with me.
For sure. I had a blast. Thanks for having me, and we'll have to keep in touch so I can hear more about what you've been up to. But yeah, I had a good time talking, and I'm glad we had the chance.
Definitely. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Derek. Appreciate it. Have a good
For
night.
sure. Talk to you later.